A few weeks ago, we released a video on how much bike prices have risen in recent years. Spoiler, it's a lot. More than inflation, in fact. And the comment section and my email inbox for that matter were filled with reasons why, from we're being mugged off to Brexit and COVID. So we thought we'd do a bit more digging. Our podcast and tech team set about researching the matter, and whilst we still can't pinpoint any singular cause for these price rises, there are plenty of interesting conversations with brands and distributors alike that we thought you might want in on. So without further ado, here's one of those chats. As always, let us know your questions and opinions down in the comments section below. And if the 80% of you lot that aren't subscribed could click that button, then, well, that would be good as well.
We are joined today by Colin Williams, who is the Director of FLI Distribution. And we're talking about essentially the increasing price of stuff, especially in the bike industry. And we've also got Jamie here as well, who wrote a really interesting article the other day called "The Rising Cost of Cycling, When Will This Crisis Stop?" So, Jamie, do you want to give us a little bit of flavour about the article and kind of what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of our listeners may have already seen the video and wrap story a feature up on the site. And it's something that really seemed to resonate with our audience, that bike prices have gone up. And that's not exclusive to just bikes, but also components, clothing, and just about anything to do with cycling has gone up in recent years. We looked at some examples. For example, a top-of-the-range S-Works SL3 in 2009 would have set you back about £5,000. The cost of that today is £11,500. And obviously, inflation does play a part in that. But inflation is responsible. So if it still costs the same as it did in 2009, it would now be £8,800 in today's money, whereas actually it is more than that. And we looked at lots of different bikes and components and group sets and basically said that inflation isn't purely responsible for this rise. And now the idea is that we go talk to different brands and find out what is responsible for that rise.
It's an interesting one. I mean, I've found it. I bought a bike last year, and that same bike now is worth, well, if I were to buy it now, it would cost me about 500 quid more, which is pretty mad. But I mean, Colin, you are the man in the know about this. So, FLI have, some massive brands that you guys work with and that you're kind of bringing into the country. So maybe you could give us a bit of insight about kind of what you've found with these increases, and maybe a little bit of an explanation about why we're kind of seeing these.
Okay, no problem at all. Well, I've been in racing bikes and that sort of stuff since the late 80s, early 90s, when mountain biking really first started. So I've seen a lot of changes, and then obviously been working in bike shops and running Fly for 15, 20 years now. So you are right. Obviously, things are going up in price right across the board for a number of reasons. And I think the first one that doesn't really get probably as much attention as it should do is just the maturing marketplace that is cycling. And as the market matures, the price that the top end can achieve is increasing. So you would never have been able to sell, well, you would have paid hundreds of thousands of pounds for a hydraulic Di2 equipped road bike in 1992 because it would have been space age technology. So what my main knowledge is of the mountain bike side and e-bikes and stuff, and what I found is that for any amount of money you're spending, whether it be 1,000 or 2,000, you're relatively getting the same sort of thing now. And £1,000 bike 10 years ago is probably not as good as £1,000 bike now. But you can spend 12,000, 15,000, 20,000 pounds on a bike now. And that's just because people are spending that money. So the customs are out there. So brands are making bikes to fit that price point because they're not spending it on their midlife crisis Lotus or whatever it is that's going on. Bikes can justify that sort of price point. Also, we're very lucky that we can buy a quality of product that is raced at world level. Like at the Tour de France, you can buy the exact same frame the guys use. If you try and buy a rally car or a motorbike or a whatever it is that is used at world level, it's 20, 30, 50 times the price of anything you can buy in the marketplace, even if you could buy it. So a lot of people compare things that aren't really the same. And that's one of the main frustrations we get, especially with the brand we work with, the KTM. People are like, oh, I can get a KTM motorbike for that amount of money. So, yeah, but that's not what they're racing on.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, it's kind of I guess that I guess we've kind of seen that, and it was interesting what you said, that £1,000 bike then versus £1,000 bike now. I mean, the rates that we've seen of trickle down from top end to medium and even kind of entry level now. Do you think that that is considerably quicker now than it was, say, 5-10 years ago?
I think the popularity of cycling and also the growth in markets, not just in the UK. I mean, the fact that suddenly people in India and China are looking to buy Ultegra level or 105 level equipped bikes rather than just like utility bikes means that the whole market is scrabbling for products at that end. So, yeah, I remember riding bikes that I used to have to carry around headset spanners with me because they fell apart, or carbon fiber treks that the bottom brackets used to drop out because the early OCLV was so bad. So now everything's improved that, yeah, you can buy, like, the entry-level gravel bikes are totally capable of doing whatever you want to do with them, really, and they're better than the early mountain bikes. So, yeah, I think the trickle-down changes over the years, and sometimes it's quicker. Sometimes it's, I mean, you could argue, do people need 105 Di2? But it's just the fact that because people do want it, you can buy it. Whether it makes as much difference as some nice carbon wheels or something else on a bike is debatable, but people are buying it. So it's the market. I think there's a little bit too much. In some cases, the market does push the brands to do what they're doing. And in other cases, you do find there's some brands who get their heads down and develop something that isn't particularly needed or wanted. And both things have an impact on the way the marketplace develops. But there's so much stuff in development so long in advance that the price it ends up costing when it gets to the consumer, it can then put it outside the price point that it was designed to be at. Whether that was because of anything that's happened in the last 3 years, the price points they were originally intended to be at when Shimano or someone released that product would probably been a lot lower than it is now. 105 Di2 really did kick off. Everyone was really like, how is this entry level? And it's like, well, it's not. Like,
yeah, I mean, we managed to do an entire podcast on that.
yeah.
It was interesting.
It's fascinating how, and those price points then obviously affect the brands. And I do find it interesting that sometimes you think that certain component companies might put a retail price on their product that is then designed to make the bikes look better value, and no one ever sells that product at that retail price. It just gets cleared out, and it's just a numbers game. But yeah, the price rises over the last few years, because when you did that graph with the Specialized particularly, I think it was quite interesting, is that you compared the price of the top end bike for that range of that bike, but how the spec had changed. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like there's so much more now with the hydraulic brakes and Di2 and things that you do get a lot more and a lot better carbon wheels and stuff that just wouldn't have been an option back in the day.
I do think that's a point that there was definitely a bit of debate about in the comment section, especially on YouTube, whether or not, I do agree that I would much rather race on or use a £2,000 bike now than a £2,000 bike 10 years ago, let's say. I agree that quality has improved massively, like with innovation in materials and group sets, more gears, hydraulic disc brakes. You do get a lot more for your money. What some people were arguing is that technology will always advance, and there was a level of R&D that went into that bike in 2009, and we're questioning whether more R&D has actually gone into the bike 10 years later to justify that price rise. If you take a telly as an example, if you spent 500 quid on a telly 10 years ago and 500 quid on a telly now, the difference in quality is going to be massive because technology will always advance. And I guess there's a balance of whether you're getting more for your money just because technology has advanced, or whether,
Yeah, no, that's true, because there is the point that obviously everything just costs more. So there's a spiral that gradually develops, and the fact that for the amount that you spend on a carbon frame now, you're going to get a lot better. I mean, we're in like 10th generation now of the carbon hardtails and road bikes frames that we use, and they are infinitely better and lighter. Don't actually cost any more money. Like that's just the cost. So I can't talk for Trek and Specialized in terms of how their cost structure is, but for ours, I know that the equivalent performance of the basic products that the bike is made from is improving, and the price hasn't really changed that much. What's cost more is the fact that the Far East, where all the frames are made, really can have to charge more for their products, and also they've become a bit of a monopoly and have the increasing demands of a workforce that want modern Western standards. So we can't exploit a Chinese workforce in quite the way it has happened in the past. So with that, you're now paying almost what it would have cost to make a frame in America back in the day. Well, probably more to make it in China now, or in the Far East generally. But you're getting a lot better product that's a lot more reliable and consistent. And if you slice the carbon frame down the middle and have a look at it, it's not just shiny paint. It's actually a quality product. So, yeah, you're right that there's a certain amount that just the base level product doesn't cost that much more. But when you've got to move that product around the world, whether it's getting the raw materials out the ground to the factory, getting all the products from the factory to their labor costs, the cost of shipping something from one place to another, then assembly costs. Even we assemble the bikes as KTM in Austria. So all the parts come in from around the world, wherever they are, and they're built in Austria. Just even like, as you know, heating the warehouse, the costs gone up. Even in our place here, the amount we spend on coffee has gone up. Everything, so every cost has got to be factored in. Whether it's not just the bare materials getting it, and that's what upsets me when I see some of the comments in some of the discussions about this, because it's often said that the bike industry's having a laugh and taking all these customers for a ride, and we're all making loads of money. But I don't know anybody who turns up to work in the bike industry in a helicopter. Like, it's just not that much money floating around in it. And the bike shops, I mean, well, the supply chains are quite inefficient in terms of how many people take a little chunk out of it before it gets to an end consumer. But also, the market isn't massive. This is the other thing, that your TV example is a great example. There's one in every house. I don't know how many high-end specialists they bring into the country, but it's not even in the thousands. Some of the bikes that we get, some of the KTMs, people are like, oh, that's quite expensive and stuff. But yeah, they'll make 200. And then it's in 3 sizes. Whereas the
economies of
motorbike
scales
comes in 1 size and is sold all around the world. Whereas the numbers, even on a big scale of bike brand, are tiny. And that has its implications.
It's essentially a mature but limited market.
Yeah.
We've
spent, as a bike industry, years and years and years fighting over the same customers. And it's so frustrating, because that's the reason the UK is so far behind a lot of mainland Europe, is because we are, and I suspect everybody at road.cc is the same, it's all our hobby, our sport, it's what we do, we race, we ride bikes, it's who we are. That's not who you grow a market to. You grow a market to people who don't consider themselves cyclists. And that then allows the bike brands to sell mass volume of bikes. And that's what happened during COVID. The bike industry went mental to people who weren't cyclists. And suddenly people saw the potential. But obviously, it's not going to continue. It couldn't continue. It was never going to continue because those people are going to go back to playing five-a-side or back to playing golf or back to going to the gym. And cycling wasn't there.
It certainly does seem that way. We are on things are returning to normal, shall we say, from before COVID.
Yeah,
and we're seeing that with lots of brands, namely Giant, are reporting a lot of stock, and that could result in some sales for the consumer. It could result in sales whilst brands like Giant try and get rid of that stock.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of companies that are owned now by private equity, big firms, massive firms who are just numbers, who are not in touch on the ground. And we're just like, oh, look, you've sold that many bikes in 2021, crack on, double next year. And I talked to all the reps. I mean, it's a small industry, so as much as we're competition, we're still mates. We're still going to ride together. And you can see the pressure some of them are under. And it's like the growth just wasn't sustainable. It was never sustainable. It was impossible to do it. But all these bike brands had pre-ordered all their stuff to guarantee they got their Shimano group sets or to get their Bosch motors or whatever it is they wanted. And now they're all sat on stuff. So yeah, there could be discounts at the end consumer level, but that is only going to result in pain to the industry. As Specialized was shown this week, laying off, what is it, 20% of their workforce?
Yeah, 8% and 8%. Ambassadors, I believe.
Yeah.
We've discussed the manufacturing costs and labor costs of that manufacturer often in Asia going up. Could we discuss more of the factors that have led to these increase in prices? So Brexit is something that is often cited. When Brexit came about, Canyon immediately put almost 400 quid on every bike in their range to UK customers. Is that something that has affected you? Is Brexit responsible for part of that price increase? And is that something that we will see come back to normal as, I don't know, trade agreements or ways around it are found?
Yeah, definitely. Brexit has had a massive impact because the import duty on bicycles that are assembled outside the UK, which is most of them, I can't guarantee everybody's supply chain, but Canyon and everybody else and us, KTM and everybody else, are assembled in Austria or Germany or Belgium or wherever it is because they've all been set up there to avoid the Chinese anti-dumping duty, is now 14% import duty on top. So £1,000 bike, 14% cost price charged to the importer when it comes across the border. So that 14% was immediately lumped onto all the bike prices pretty quickly by the brands. So Canyon and stuff, obviously it's directly resulted, but I was in a dealer who sells, I think it was Trek at the time, and he got the notification through that we're going up by about 20%, just import duty. But then when you've got import duty, you've also got customs clearance fees and you've got all the admin and logistics to go with it. So it's not just the 14%. And also when you put 14% on the base value, you add that up for everyone's margins, the actual increase at retail price is more than 14%. So that's a direct cost. Whether it improves, everyone's looking at ways to minimize it, to try and, I don't know, just sort your supply chain out. But for us, for instance, we as KTM shipped direct from the factory in Austria to the bike shops. So there's only one shipment cost, and the dealer now essentially has to handle the import and everything else that goes with it. So a way around it was to ship to us at our warehouse and then us to ship to the dealers. It saves a little bit of admin for the shops and that kind of stuff, but it means we've got two shipments then. One from KTM to us and one from us to the bike shop. We still don't avoid the 14% duty. We just have, instead of having a £50, well, it's £70 now, customs clearance fees per invoice, we'd have that once rather than 50 times. But the extra costs of shipping, it's actually higher to have another step in the supply chain. Plus, they'd have to pay us rather than paying KTM, and it just becomes an admin, it's an extra hurdle, which would mean more costs. So we've looked at all the ways we can possibly reduce it. I mean, I was looking at our price list yesterday in preparation for this conversation. And so a retail price, it's different for e-bikes because the margin, the import duty is less. But on a road bike, let's say, with a retail price last year of £7,800, the retail price now is 9,127, and that is just Brexit.
Yeah, that is
So,
very significant.
yeah. So now that is only the Brexit increase, because that's just us taking the invoice that the dealer would pay KTM normally, the price that all the European dealers pay. It's all the same. That's the price. And then we add on the import duty, the customs clearance fees, and the admin that the couriers charge for that. And then the dealer pays 2 invoices. And to make the same margin they would do, that's the new retail price.
That's mad.
So that's only Brexit.
That's
So
absolutely mad.
that is obviously a huge increase. We have recently seen, so just this week, Canyon has, for an example, has reduced their bike prices by £200. We asked them how they'd managed to do that, basically. And they said that that was due to a reduction in import duties, because I believe, now they didn't like to say this, but I believe what they're doing is using a bonded warehouse. So when most of your bikes and products are made in Asia, I believe this is how they're doing it. Anyway.
No, yeah.
They're coming into Germany,
yeah,
and then being assembled. And if they stay in a bonded warehouse, like a closed loop, that those bikes can then no longer be used in the European market.
Yeah.
And assembled in Germany and then come here. And so do you think we'll see other brands being able to reduce their Brexit costs and bike prices return slightly more to, I say normal, 2019 levels?
The numbers for that, because obviously spent every waking minute since 2016 trying to get my head around this. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, because what they have to do in order to do that is know exactly which bikes are for the UK market in advance.
Yes. Yes.
Ring fence it and then move it to the UK, which they don't know. They can't know, really, unless they start limiting the availability of stuff to other markets and focusing stuff on the UK. That has 2 cost implications. The first one is you've got to pay for a bonded warehouse, and that's a lot more expensive than the duty on a few bikes. You've got to deal with all the costs of that bonded warehouse and the shipping, dedicating it and pulling stock and guaranteeing it. So it isn't cheaper. Now, they know what they're doing. Well, I hope they know what they're doing. But we looked at it and it doesn't make any financial sense.
Yep. Well, that's interesting to know, because that's obviously how larger companies, if we're talking about like those tellies, like from earlier, like that is how the big tech companies are overcoming these costs. Obviously, we don't know if Canyon are actually using bonded warehouses. That was just
it's just it is something we looked at, because it's in theory easier than just shipping from the Far East to UK. Essentially having a UK hub for whatever brand it is you do. But then you have got warehouse staff costs dedicated to your brand that will increase the cost of the bike more than just paying the duty. So it's just, they're basically, all it's done is gone up until 2021, when this really kicked off in terms of what it's doing. We could move bikes around inside the EU with 0 costs. It was exactly the same moving a bike from Huddersfield to Cheltenham or to Bristol to Birmingham as it was Vienna to UK. Yep. No costs. Take 2 days. We get 48-hour shipments from Austria to here. Now it can be a month. And that month costs, because the bikes are somewhere in a lorry.
Yeah.
So the bonded warehouse thing, we have looked at it, but if you're doing TVs, as you're saying, you've got a historical market size, exactly what your customers are pre-ordering. They can pre-order the bike, whatever it is, can sit in a bonded warehouse. You can pull them in as you need in containers, dead easy, but still costs. And again, that is all costs extra because of Brexit that wasn't needed before. If you sell direct to the public, as a brand like Canyon might do, it means you can have zero assembly in Europe. It has to come in as a boxed bike from the Far East.
Okay.
Not be touched and moved to the UK. So you might as well just ship them straight to the UK.
Yeah.
There's so many ways, because we're all still trying to work out how to do this. and how to look at costs. I mean, it might be that a brand has set a price in the past that is higher than they needed to, and realize that actually now they're shipping in more volume, they can ship them in bulk and save, because the cost is, if you're shipping direct to a end consumer in the UK, it's between £50 and £70 per invoice to clear customs before you even look at duty.
We are seeing more brands go direct to consumer. So Specialized and Giant in the UK have announced that they will be going direct to consumer. I don't know if that's going to impact prices. It obviously means that they've got complete control over what's coming into the UK and stuff. But hopefully there's actually stock of bikes now to buy, because that was the problem for the last few years. Even people who wanted bikes couldn't buy what they wanted.
Yeah, it's definitely going to have an impact. And that's also brands looking at how much money they can make and whether it's easier to grow the margin or, grow the pie essentially in terms of how much you can sell, or actually make more money from the same amount of bikes. And I think there's some bike brands that may be looking at it going, we probably reached capacity as what we can sell, so we need to either buy the shops or start selling direct and make more money from the same number of bike sales without increasing the price.
So other factors that contribute to price increases, obviously it's been in the news a lot with the shipping sort of crisis. That's obviously been driven by oil costs, but that is, I believe that's coming back down to normal shipping costs.
Yeah, I was just trying to find an email which had an example from we work with a German kids bike brand who does Pookie, they build more balance bikes and that sort of stuff in Europe than anybody else. They make huge numbers of balance bikes. And he was talking to us about the impact of the shipping container prices, in terms of you can't get any more bikes in a shipping container. They assemble them all and even paint them all and build everything, but they still need tyres from Schwalbe or brakes from overall Shimano stuff. And it was just insane, the amount that the shipping containers were going up by, and the fact that you can't make any more money from these small products, that the price increases you can offer is not ridiculous. There's only so much you can charge for a balance bike. I mean, it's just not point. It's not like people want to spend loads and loads of money. So it's been, the shipping cost has been hugely challenging because people just weren't able to get stuff. And it has forced people to look at more local supply chains, but they aren't necessarily cheaper. They're just nearer.
I saw somewhere that it was something like 1,500% increase in container shipping costs. Is that kind of around the figure?
I only remember the dollars prices now. I remember being upwards of, like, it was $10,000, $12,000 to ship a container from the Far East, where it used to be $2,000 or something. I mean, I don't know the numbers because we don't deal with the Far East. I've given up on that a long time ago and just deal with Europe now. But yeah, even the cost of getting something from, like, just shipping to Northern Ireland. We used to ship to Northern Ireland. It's just not financially worth it, really. The costs of doing everything shipping wise just went crazy to the extent where even it's this sort of thing that the end consumers won't appreciate, really, I suppose, is what insight we can offer from here, is that historically the warranty situation with KTM was always dealt with by Austria, and if there was a frame that was going back or someone needed a headset or whatever, whatever product it was, it just got sent straight to the dealer. So dealer gets the new part in next day and they collect the old product. It's all done with that easy. Now, the couriers cost so much to move the stuff into and out of Europe. There's the customs clearance fees, which there isn't supposed to be on zero value, but it always gets charged. You end up with a customer getting an invoice. It's just a nightmare. So now all the stuff has to come to us. So we have to deal with every single warranty case now here in the UK that we didn't need to before. So there's pallets of stuff turning up that costs X amount of money to ship the pallets in. We have to then send the replacement frame out to the dealer. The dealer has to then send a replacement frame to us, and we have to box them all up and ship them here and ship them out again. So it's like 4 or 5 times the cost. I've got a member of staff here just dealing with it. Again, these are all just costs that are because it's 90% Brexit, 10% shipping cost, but it's because of the border these costs have gone up. So suddenly, the margin we were making to cover this, we need X amount more because it's all this time and space and shipping all these costs have gone up, which is why the bikes, we have to factor in a little bit more for our cost, because we're doing so much more than we need to be doing because of this blooming border. So yeah, it's solved instantly by single market access. Instantly. Like it's one phone call from someone at government level to go, this is a stupid idea, let's rejoin the single market, and boom, all these costs go away again. But what I don't understand is how much money the government is getting in import duty that's essentially extra tax. So we pay the VAT 20%, we're now paying duty 14.5%. So that money's going somewhere. So they're obviously like quids in. So they're making money. Now, whether they're using that in a good way, we can only hope.
I mean, so far it's been very insightful, but very depressing. Yeah. But what do you see for the future? What do you can you see people? You know, we've obviously seen Canyon make these changes where we're going to see a reduction in prices. Do you think that we're likely to see anything from kind of other brands where they're kind of maybe able to adapt to the system? Whether there's going to be industry-wide changes that kind of help everyone, or is there not really kind of discussions around that yet?
There is, because always the brands, like, as much as this is a lovely industry and a hobby and we all love what we're doing and stuff, it is still supposed to be a business. So we're all looking for ways to essentially sell more bikes, be as competitive as possible, but not have a race to the bottom in terms of losing money. But the industry's in a challenging place. Like, there's shops going bust, there's distributors going bust, there's people being laid off in all these brands. It's not like brilliant. And that's what upsets me when we see people commenting on these posts saying, "Oh, the bike industry's making loads of money. They've never had it better." And it's like, no, these are challenging times, and not because everyone was super greedy and like made loads of money during COVID. In a way, that got a lot of people out of trouble. Like, shops were in a tricky place. You could argue there's too many bike shops in the UK, or there's too many bike brands available, and everyone's trying to fight for this small pie and no one's growing it. But yeah, it's not rosy. The price is, I mean, it's like the fuel cost now. You go to supermarket, petrol's come down in price like 25%, probably more than that. How that affects things in terms of even just like our costs to go out and visit dealers. It's cheaper now than it was 6 months ago to go and visit our customers. But does anything ever really come down? I don't know. Yeah. I think people especially with bikes, people will make a lot of compromises before they compromise on their cycling habit. So it's like, right, well, I might not go to the gym as much, or I might not have that extra bottle of wine a week. I'll still buy my bike or people might be like, well, I'll have Ultegra Di2 rather than Dura-Race Di2 or whatever, but I still need my new bike for the year. So we're lucky having an industry that is such loyal customers and people who ride bikes. It's part of who they are. But I honestly, I can't see things coming down by, I mean, like you said, Canyon's like 200 quid or whatever it is, but that's when you're spending 8-9 grand on a bike. Yeah, you know, I mean, it's tiny amounts really in the scheme of things. Everyone is looking at the supply chains, looking at stuff, working out whether or not you need all these steps. Do you need all the reps? Do you need this? Do you need that? Can we cut costs and do this to make it more efficient? But yeah, no one's making silly money in this supply chain that I'm aware of. I've never seen anyone in the bike industry that smashed it. And it worries me in terms of the shops and even the advertising, like you guys are getting stuff. It's where people cut corners. It's the first thing that goes, isn't it, really? And often that's quite a short-sighted approach, is that whether, because even if you look at the top, I mean, we've lost our essentially Tour de France team at KTM. The B&B Hotels team stopped. UK teams have fallen all the time. So is it because they're too expensive for what they bring back to the table, or I don't know. It's yeah, we will see. It's definitely not boring.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and there's a lot going on, and that's what I do like about whenever we talk to anyone behind the scenes in any supply chain. I'm always like, oh right, because I've got friends who work for like Nike and Red Bull and stuff, and you realise when you talk to those guys, oh yeah, everyone's got the same problems. Like, there's a whole floor of people who are dedicated to try and work out how to get around this Brexit stuff and how to deal with this and how to deal with this. So whatever scale of company you're at, the problems are just bigger and the costs are bigger. there's not an easy solution. No one really knows what's going on.
Mm.
And we have to just manage it. It's just, honestly, the amount of time we could spend replying to people who are like, but I can get this KTM motorbike for this price and the road bike's the same price. I'm like, yes, but you can also buy a watch for that price. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like you're not comparing the same things. You're just saying, right, for £5,000, I can buy all these different things. It's not relevant.
Colin, that was really insightful. Thank you so much.
Let us know in the comments section below what questions you'd like us to put to the bike industry next. And as always, if you found this content informative or interesting, then please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.